"You only get in the way," she said. That's what my daughter told me as I stood in the kitchen, soaked from the walk home, reeking of fry oil and old coffee, still wearing my McDonald's uniform. She didn't even look up from the phone. Just said it, like I was a misplaced chair or a stubborn stain on the linoleum. I didn't say a word. I had a paper bag with a sausage biscuit in my hand, leftover from the shift. I'd saved it thinking maybe it'd be a treat for little Caleb or June. They used to get excited when I brought home grandma food. Now it just sat in my hand, cooling, as the air around me turned heavy. "I'll be in my room," I said finally. But even that felt like I was begging permission. Nancy didn't answer. She was back to scrolling, feet up on the coffee table I bought back in '94 when that table still meant something. Caleb had his headphones in, his thumbs flying across some screen. June didn't even look up. My room was in the back, no lock. The bed sagged. The window leaked when it rained. I sat on the edge of the mattress, hearing the muffled laughter from the living room. I wasn't part of it. I hadn't been for years. I opened the drawer in my nightstand. Inside were my documents. The deed to the house, folded neatly in a plastic sleeve. Copies of my insurance. A printout of my bank account, dwindled down to 4 figures. I hadn't looked at that number in months. I was too afraid it might disappear if I stared too long. That night, I didn't sleep. By 4 in the morning, I was dressed. Not in my uniform, not in that tired red and yellow, but in my plain black coat and the same shoes I wore to Derek's funeral. I packed only a small duffel, my documents, a change of clothes, my medicine, and the tiny envelope of cash I kept hidden in the hem of an old jacket, just in case. That morning was the in case. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. Instead, I made one last walk through the house. Not to say goodbye, I wasn't sentimental like that. Just to see it for what it was, now that I was leaving it behind. The fridge door that never quite sealed. The chip in the hallway tile from when June fell off her scooter. The photo frame on the wall, crooked, dusty. Our last full family photo. 15 years old. I took the frame off the wall, removed the photo, and slipped it into my bag. Then I opened the front door and stepped outside. The air smelled like early fall. The kind of morning that makes you wrap your arms around yourself. I stood on the porch a minute, waiting to see if anyone would notice. A sound, a voice, a creak of the floor. Nothing. I walked to the street. Then I kept walking. I didn't have a plan, just a direction. Away. At the corner, I turned back once. The house stood still, dark, unaware. I whispered not to it, but to myself. 30 days. That's how long they'd have once the notice hit their mailbox. The house was mine. I'd paid the taxes, the repairs, the second mortgage when Nancy lost her job. I kept the internet running, the heat on, the water warm. I made sure Caleb could stream his cartoons, June could play her games, Nancy could scroll her feed in comfort, and all I got was, "You only get in the way." So I left, and they'd find out the rest 30 days later. The motel was $26 a night if you didn't mind the stained sheets and the smell of cigarettes clinging to the curtains. I didn't. The front desk clerk, a boy who couldn't have been more than 19, handed me a key without looking up from his phone. Room 207, second floor. No elevator. The duffel bag pulled at my shoulder like guilt. I dragged it up the metal stairs, each step echoing. The room was small, cold. The kind of place meant for truckers who don't ask questions or couples who don't want names. I locked the door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed. I hadn't thought this far ahead. I had $418 in my checking account. Another $200 in cash, folded into a sock at the bottom of the bag. My next paycheck from McDonald's was coming in 5 days. It would be $384 after taxes. I could stretch it if I didn't eat much, if I stayed quiet, invisible. I took off my shoes, peeled off my socks. My feet were blistered from the shift. You'd think after 12 years behind the counter I'd have grown calluses thick enough to ignore the pain. But the truth is, it gets worse with age. You don't harden, you bruise deeper. I pulled the blankets around me and lay down in the dark. My back ached. My knees throbbed. I missed my own bed, even if it sagged in the middle. I missed the sound of June snoring softly through the wall. I missed Caleb tapping on the pipes in the bathroom when he was bored. I missed... No, not Nancy. I didn't miss her. But I did miss the version of her from long ago. The girl who used to bring me wildflowers from the side of the road. The one who cried into my shoulder after her first heartbreak. The one who once said, "If I ever treat you the way some people treat their mothers, slap me." I never slapped her. Instead, I worked morning shifts to pay for her heat and her Netflix. At 5:12 a.m., I woke up without an alarm. My body still believed it had to be on its feet. I stared at the ceiling for a while, then got up, washed my face with motel soap, and put on my uniform. It was still damp from yesterday. I hadn't brought a second one. I'd planned to do laundry that night, but plans had changed. I took the city bus to the McDonald's on Clarkson Avenue, where I'd been working since I was 56. Back then, I'd told myself it was temporary, just until Nancy got back on her feet after the divorce, just until she found her next job, just until Caleb started school, just until. 12 years of just until. The manager, Lisa, nodded when I walked in. She didn't know anything. I hadn't told anyone. I wasn't ready for pity, or worse, concern. Concern leads to questions. And questions lead to sympathy. And sympathy, when you're holding yourself together with a safety pin, can rip everything apart. So I took my place at the counter. I poured coffee for the early risers, wiped trays, mopped spills. I smiled when I had to. I said, "Have a great day," and, "Would you like fries with that?" Like someone who still believed the words mattered. By 11 a.m., my feet were screaming again. In the break room, I sat alone and ate a small cup of apples, free with my shift. I checked my phone. One message. Spam. Nothing from Nancy. Nothing from anyone. I stared at my reflection in the microwave door. Wrinkles had carved deep around my mouth like parentheses around silence. My hair, still dark in some places, hung limp from the ponytail. My hands looked old, tired, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The house was gone to them. They didn't know it yet, but the first envelope would arrive by the end of the week. It would look official, cold, the way they'd treated me. I didn't hate them, but I couldn't save them anymore. And maybe, I could start saving myself. The woman in the next bunk coughed all night, dry, rattling, like dust trying to breathe. She didn't talk much. Nobody in the shelter did, really. We were all shadows, trying not to bump into each other too loud. I'd left the motel after 5 nights. Too expensive, too temporary. The shelter wasn't much better. Metal-framed beds, rubber mattresses, a smell that clung to your clothes like disappointment. But it was warm, and warm was enough. They gave you 3 nights, sometimes 5 if you kept quiet and didn't cause trouble. I was good at not causing trouble. Breakfast was toast and peanut butter. I took mine with black coffee from a plastic jug. I sat by the window even though there wasn't much to look at, just the side wall of another building, stained by years of rain. It had been 12 days since I left the house. I'd passed it once from across the street. I wore a scarf, kept my head down. The porch light was still on, even in the middle of the day. Nancy always forgot. I wondered if she'd noticed the first envelope yet. Probably not. She never opened mail unless it looked fun. Part of me expected her to call, yell, plead. Something. But the phone stayed silent. Maybe they still hadn't noticed. Or maybe they thought I was bluffing. I wasn't. I hadn't been bluffing the night I walked out, and I wasn't bluffing when I signed the forms with the notary on 11th Street. The house was in my name. I had every right. It was one of the few things I hadn't let go of over the years. I paid the taxes. I paid for the siding, the plumbing, the leaky roof. I paid for the smart TV Nancy watched her shows on. I even paid for the damn air fresheners in the hallway. And for what? So she could tell me I was in the way? That I should keep to myself when guests came over? That Caleb was too old to be tucked in by a grandmother who smelled like fries? The shelter closed at 9 a.m. for cleaning. We had to be out by then. I wrapped my coat tighter around me and stepped onto the street. The air had that sharp smell. Rain on metal. I started walking. Nowhere in particular. I just didn't want to sit still. Sometimes when you move, the hurt doesn't catch up right away. I ended up at the library. The warmth hit me like a hug. I hadn't been inside a library in years. Not since June needed help with her state history project, and Nancy was too busy. The librarian gave me a polite nod. No questions. I found a quiet corner near the large print fiction and sat with a book I didn't read. Just held it in my lap like something sacred. An older woman sat 2 chairs over, working on a crossword. She had that look. Neat blouse. Tired eyes. Fingers that moved with practiced gentleness. She glanced at me once, then again. "You okay, hun?" she asked finally. The word caught me. Han. I couldn't remember the last time someone called me anything but Ma or Grandma. And lately, not even that. I nodded. "Just cold," I said. It wasn't a lie. She didn't press. Just slid a wrapped peppermint across the table toward me. I took it, held it in my palm a moment before tucking it into my pocket. We didn't speak again, but when she left, she touched my shoulder softly, the way you do when words won't fit. That night, I couldn't get into the shelter. Too many people, not enough beds. They turned me away with a muttered apology. I stood on the sidewalk, unsure where to go. Then I remembered the bus depot downtown. They kept the lights on all night, had bathrooms, sometimes even vending machines. It wasn't safety, but it was shelter. I curled up on a bench with my coat over me and my duffel bag pressed against my chest. The bench was hard. The lights were too bright. But I slept. And in the middle of the night, I dreamed of my own bed. The one with the dent in the middle. The one I had left behind. When I woke up, a janitor was sweeping the floor. "Rough night?" he asked, not unkindly. I nodded, stood, stretched. He looked at me for a second, then handed me a paper cup of water. "You need anything?" he asked. It was the first time anyone had asked me that in weeks. I didn't know how to answer. Nancy hadn't always been like that. That's the part that stung the most. I remember her in 2nd grade, crying because another kid pushed me at the school's spring fair. She marched right up to him, hands balled into fists, and told him, "Don't touch my mama." She was all knees and ponytail, And I remember thinking, she's going to be fierce when she grows up. She was. Just not for me. The shift happened slowly, like rust. At first, it was small things. Her forgetting to say thank you when I paid her cell phone bill, brushing me off when I asked how her job hunt was going. Then came the bigger ones. Locking herself in her room for days, refusing to eat anything I cooked, telling the kids not to bother Grandma when she's acting weird. Acting weird. I was working double shifts to keep the water running. I was skipping lunch so they could have better groceries. The last time I bought anything new for myself was a pair of sneakers 3 years ago, and even that I got on sale. I still remember the look the cashier gave me when I asked if they had an extra discount for seniors, like I was pathetic for even asking. But that's what I'd become, invisible, until they needed something. Grandma, the Wi-Fi's not working. Mom, you didn't pick up the tide again. Can you grab Caleb from school? I'm just so swamped. Always something. Always, can you? Never, how are you? And the thing is, I always said yes. Every time. The one time I said no, when I told Nancy I couldn't co-sign a loan for her new SUV, she didn't speak to me for 2 days, said I didn't support her, that I enjoyed watching her struggle. I laughed when she said that. I didn't mean to. It just came out. Because I'd been scraping grease out of fryer baskets at 5 a.m. while she slept until 9. Watching her struggle? She slammed the door that night. I stayed up, rereading the property documents. I did that sometimes, not because I doubted my name was on them, but because I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the years I spent holding that house together, watching every penny, skipping the dentist so we could fix the roof. When she moved back in after the divorce, she said it was just for a few months. That was 8 years ago. 8. At first, I was glad to have the company. It was nice hearing feet in the hallway again, a child's laughter in the next room. The silence had gotten too thick since Derek died. But months turned into years. I became the built-in babysitter, the midnight chauffeur, the walking wallet. And when I brought up the idea of her getting back on her feet, she'd brush me off. This economy's brutal, or I'm focusing on the kids right now. She had time for everything but responsibility. And I let it happen. I told myself it was what mothers do. That family sticks together. That if I just gave a little more time, a little more patience, she'd find her way back. She'd remember who we were to each other. But she didn't. She forgot. Forgot the woman who once stayed up 3 nights straight sewing her a Halloween costume when money was tight. Forgot the hospital visits, the rides to dance class. The way I used to sing her to sleep when she had night terrors. Forgot everything but what she needed from me right now. And when she finally said, "All you do is get in the way," I knew she believed it. Not just in a moment of anger. Not just words said too fast. She'd been thinking it, feeling it, letting it fester. So I stopped getting in the way. I got out. Now I sat on a park bench with half a peanut butter sandwich in my coat pocket and sore knees that didn't bend like they used to. And all I could think was, what happens to women like me? The ones who give everything, every ounce, every dollar, every breath, and still end up discarded like junk mail? What do we do when we finally run out of giving? Because nobody ever taught me how to want anything for myself. Only how to give. But maybe that's about to change. The worst part of the morning shift wasn't the hours. It wasn't the heat from the grill or the customers who sighed like I'd personally ruined their day by asking, "Would you like to make that a combo?" It was the uniform. That polyester blend never quite dried. Even after a full wash, it held onto smells like a stubborn child. Grease, sour pickles, disinfectant. I'd worn the same 3 shirts in rotation for 12 years. One had a tear under the arm I kept stitched with black thread. Another had a fading name tag that used to say Martina, but now just looked like smudged vinyl. Every time I pulled that uniform on, I felt myself disappear a little more. McDonald's wasn't hell. I've seen worse. But it wasn't dignity either. You were expected to smile at folks who wouldn't meet your eyes. You learned how to take blame for things you didn't cause. Broken ice cream machine? Your fault. Long line? Your fault. Cold fries? Guess who they glared at? There's something about wearing a headset and asking if they want ketchup that makes people forget you're a person. But I needed the hours. The day I left home, I didn't stop working. I couldn't afford to. The bills didn't stop just because my heart was tired. I clocked in, same as always, took my 10-minute break on the milk crate by the dumpster because the break room smelled like moldy buns. I didn't complain. Complaining was for people who had other options. At noon, Lisa, my manager, handed me a new hire to train, a boy named Tyrell, 17, wiry arms, headphones still hanging around his neck like a stubborn habit. He looked at me like I was his grandmother and his prison warden all in one. "You been here long?" he asked. "Long enough," I said, handing him a visor. He didn't ask anything else, and I didn't offer. But as we worked, I watched him. The way he flinched when Lisa raised her voice, how he looked over his shoulder when he made a mistake. I knew that kind of fear, knew where it came from. After his shift, he lingered by the lockers, picking at a callus on his palm. "You all right?" I asked. He hesitated. Then, "Yeah, just, I don't got anywhere to go till 6. My uncle don't want me home during the day. Says I get in the way." I felt that phrase land like a stone in my gut. "Well," I said, "you're not in the way here." He looked at me, surprised, then nodded, almost like he didn't believe it, but needed to. That night, I sat on the floor of the shelter with my knees pulled up, thinking about Tyrell, about how many of us were out here, floating just under the surface, unseen, unspoken, uninvited. I took out my phone and opened my notes app. I began typing numbers, not words, just numbers. What I earned, what I owed, what I'd need to save in order to find something small. A room, a corner, somewhere with a door that locked from the inside. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. I didn't think about Nancy. I didn't think about the house. If they'd seen the second envelope yet. If they were calling the number on the letter, confused, furious, finally realizing that wasn't my business anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder trying to keep someone else's roof from caving in. I was building my own, one shift at a time, one aching step at a time. And someday, not now, but someday, I was going to wear clothes that didn't smell like fryer oil, and no one would call me just in the way. The house wasn't always mine. Derek and I bought it in 1986. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, cracked walkway, but good bones. He loved to say that. "Good bones, Marty." He'd grin, his hand on the banister. "Just needs love." And we gave it love. Bit by bit. Nights after work scraping paint off window trim, weekends replacing the kitchen linoleum tile by tile. I remember standing on a stepladder, 7 months pregnant with Nancy, painting the nursery walls yellow because we didn't want to know the gender. He played old country songs on the radio while I cursed the edges. After he passed, sudden, heart gone in a snap. I didn't have the heart to leave. People offered, said I should move in with my sister in Arizona, said the house would be too much for a widow. They didn't know me. I stayed, raised Nancy, took 2 jobs, paid off the rest of the mortgage in 19 years. I remember the day I made the final payment. I went to the bank in my good church skirt, even though it was summer and sweat pooled down my back. I signed that last check with a pen I'd brought from home. Not because it was fancy, just mine. That was the first time I felt rich. The bank manager smiled and said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Joyce. The house is yours." And it was. So when Nancy came to me after the divorce, with 2 kids and nowhere to go, I didn't think twice. "We'll make it work," I said. And we did. At first. I cleared out the 2nd bedroom for the kids, moved my sewing machine into the hallway closet, gave Nancy my dresser when hers broke. I paid the utilities, groceries, gas. She got a part-time job at the salon, but the hours were spotty. Then she quit. Said she needed to be home for Caleb's speech therapy. I didn't argue. Not once. I picked up an extra shift at McDonald's. I told myself it was temporary. She started dating again. Nights she'd disappear and come back smelling like cheap perfume that wasn't hers. The kids got used to eating dinner with just me. When I hinted, gently, about her finding work again, she snapped. "It's not the 1950s, Ma. I'm not just going to take whatever scraps I'm handed." That was rich, coming from someone who lived off mine. Still, I let it go. You don't kick your daughter out. You don't leave your grandchildren in the wind. But one night, after a fight over Caleb using the stove without supervision, he nearly burned a dish towel, Nancy shouted, "Maybe if you didn't hover so much, we wouldn't need to watch you all the time." I stood there, stunned. They had to watch me? I was working mornings on my feet at 68 while she slept in and I needed supervision? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table long after the lights were out. I pulled out the deed, unfolded the paper I kept in the metal tin above the fridge. My name. Just mine. Derek had put it in only my name years ago after his brother's widow lost her house to debt. "This way it's protected," he'd said. "They can't take what's yours." Funny. At the time I thought he meant banks, but now I knew he'd meant them, the ones who think they're owed. I didn't make the decision that night, but the seed had rooted. So when I finally left, I didn't do it in anger. I did it in clarity. I walked out knowing what was mine and what wasn't. The house was mine. Their entitlement wasn't. I didn't owe anyone the roof over their heads just because they'd grown used to ignoring the hands that held it up. And I sure as hell didn't owe them my silence anymore. Her name was Linda. Social worker. Mid-50s. Short brown curls, sensible shoes, clipboard held to her chest like armor. She found me outside the shelter on a Thursday morning. I was sitting on the curb with my duffel bag at my feet, sipping weak coffee from a vending machine cup and watching the world pass me like I'd fallen out of it. "You, Martina Joyce?" she asked, eyes kind but sharp. "Depends who's asking," I said, more reflex than wit. She smiled like she was used to it. "I work with the Community Housing Support Program. Got your name from the intake desk. Said you've been here a few nights." I nodded, slow. Didn't know they were giving out names. "They give out stories," she said, crouching beside me. "But I like to hear it from the source." I didn't know what to say to that. So I sipped my coffee and said nothing. She sat next to me anyway. I'm not here to fix your life, Miss Joyce, just to see if you want some options. Options, I repeated like the word was a foreign object. Yeah, she said gently. Maybe a women's housing co-op. Maybe something long-term if we can get the paperwork going. But first, I'd like to understand what brought you here. And just like that, I felt my throat tighten. I looked away, toward the cracked sidewalk, the gum stains, the cigarette butts flattened like old decisions. You don't have to tell me now, Linda said, rising, but when you're ready. We don't do charity. We do dignity. That's our policy. I scoffed, but it wasn't mean. Dignity, I said. That ship sailed a while ago. She gave me a card. Then let's get you another boat. That afternoon, I met her at the community center. I'd showered at the shelter and pulled my hair back, used a safety pin to keep my pant hem from dragging. I looked tired, but I didn't feel small. Linda led me into a small room with faded chairs and a water cooler that clicked and hummed like it had opinions. We talked. Or rather, she asked, and I unraveled. Not all at once, but thread by thread. She never interrupted, never looked at her watch, just let the story breathe. And when I was done, she didn't say, "Oh my God," or "How could they?" She said, "You're brave." It startled me. Brave? I'd always thought brave was what other people were. Firefighters, nurses, women with loud voices and good teeth. I was just tired, practical, used to being needed in ways that drained me dry. But brave? You left when staying meant erasing yourself, Linda said quietly. That's not nothing. I left with a folder of options. Some were dead ends. Shelters with wait lists, housing programs requiring paperwork I didn't have. But one name caught my eye. A cooperative for senior women in transition, 2 bus lines away, shared kitchen, no stairs. Nothing fancy. But a room with a lock. A place I wouldn't have to leave by 9 a.m. A place where, for once, I wouldn't be the only one trying to stitch herself back together in silence. I didn't decide that day. I needed time, needed to sit with the idea that someone saw me not as a failure or a burden, but as someone brave. Back at the shelter, a woman asked if she could have the top bunk. Her knees were worse than mine. Sure, I said, pulling myself up to the second tier. No problem. As I lay there, staring at the flickering ceiling light, I thought of Nancy. Again. Not with anger, but with an ache, like touching a bruise. She hadn't called. Not once. But I didn't feel as hollow as before. Maybe it was Linda's words echoing in my chest. Or maybe, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel disposable. I felt seen. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to see myself that way too. Her name was Maeve. We'd worked together at McDonald's for almost 5 years. Not close, but close enough. She used to bring homemade ginger snaps to the break room in December and leave early on Sundays to care for her mother. I hadn't seen her since before the pandemic, back when Lisa still wore high heels to work, and I thought, staying in that house made me strong. I ran into Maeve outside a Dollar General. I was looking at clearance socks when I heard someone say, "Martina?" I turned and there she was, holding a basket full of canned peaches and discount shampoo, wearing the same old coat she used to wear on overnight shifts. A little heavier, maybe, a little grayer at the roots. But still, Maeve. God, she said, setting her basket down. I thought that was you. I wasn't sure what to say. I was used to being invisible these days, and part of me panicked. What did she know? What had she heard? But her face wasn't judging. It was relief. You working mornings again? She asked. I shook my head. Still clocking in, just... Life's been a little upside down. She nodded slowly. Same here. We went to a bench outside, shared a sleeve of crackers she had in her bag, and we talked. I told her I'd left the house, that things had gotten bad, that I was staying here and there trying to keep my chin up. I didn't tell her everything. Some bruises are still too fresh to name, but enough. She didn't blink, didn't pity me, just nodded. My cousin went through something like that, she said. Had to start from scratch. Lived in her car for a while. Now she's doing cleaning for a bunch of retired folks in a condo community. Turns out old people trust other old people to dust their baseboards. I chuckled. The first real laugh I'd let out in weeks. Maeve looked at me. You're good with people. Always have been. You ever think about doing that kind of work? I started to shake my head, then stopped. I had thought about it. Not directly, but in flashes. Wiping the counter at the shelter and thinking how I could do it better. Folding towels at the shelter's laundry shift and imagining how I'd organize a linen closet from scratch. I wouldn't know where to start, I said honestly. Maeve shrugged. Start with me. My aunt's got a bad hip and a house full of trinkets. She pays $50 just for someone to vacuum and listen to her talk about her cats. I was supposed to go Saturday, but I've got a dentist thing. Want to take my place? I blinked. Are you serious? Maeve grinned. Why not? You got 2 hands and patience. That's all she wants. That Saturday, I took the bus to a beige house on Maple Street. Her aunt, Ms. Lucille, was already waiting on the porch with a glass of lemonade and a list of things that weren't urgent but wouldn't clean themselves. I vacuumed the living room, scrubbed the bathroom sink, organized her kitchen drawers. She told me about her late husband, who collected baseball cards, and her sister, who stole a bunt pan in 1983 and never gave it back. When I was done, she pressed a crisp $50 bill into my hand and said, "You have nice energy, like you're holding something steady in the world." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just smiled. On the bus ride back, I stared out the window, holding the bill in my hand like it was a rare flower. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to return to anything that hurt just because it was familiar. Maeve texted me that night. Lucille loved you. Want another one next week? My neighbor's looking. I replied, yes. Then I stared at the word for a long time. I'd spent so many years saying yes for everyone else. Yes to sacrifice. Yes to silence. Yes to being small. This was different. This was my yes. And it felt like the first stone in a path I hadn't dared believe I could walk. The third envelope must have landed in Nancy's mailbox by now. I pictured it sitting there between grocery store coupons and streaming service promotions. Crisp, white, government sealed. Unopened, probably. She never opened mail unless it had color or discount codes. But it didn't matter. The notice had gone through. 30 days from filing. 22 now by my count. The countdown was ticking whether she believed it or not. And I bought myself a coat. Not a fancy one. Not the wool kind rich women wear in catalogs with collars like capes. No, just a warm brown winter coat from a thrift shop near the church. Clean, lined, pockets deep enough for both hands. $10.89. It was the first thing I'd bought for myself that wasn't food or medicine in over a decade. I walked out of the shop feeling like I'd stolen something. Not from them, from time. From a version of myself that never thought she deserved anything new. I stopped at the corner cafe and got a coffee too. The girl behind the counter called me ma'am and smiled like she meant it. I sat by the window and stirred my cream in silence, watching people pass by like I wasn't ashamed anymore. I had $40 left from the cleaning jobs I'd picked up through Maeve's friends. 3 houses in 5 days. Turns out, people trust a woman who moves slowly, who listens when they talk about dead husbands and adult children who don't call. One woman, Irene, pressed an extra 20 into my hand and whispered, "You remind me of my sister. She used to take care of everyone, forgot to take care of herself." I didn't say anything back, but the words stuck. Maybe that's what we do. Women like us. We pour ourselves out until we're hollow, and by the time we realize we're empty, everyone's too used to the silence to ask if we're all right. I walked past a mirror in a shop window and caught my reflection. Coat zipped, hair combed, spine straighter than it used to be. I looked fine. Not happy. Not healed. But not broken either. That night, I didn't go back to the shelter. I used $22 to rent a room in a boarding house Maeve told me about. Shared bathroom, no kitchen, but clean sheets and a working lock, a door that shut from the inside and didn't need excuses. I sat on the narrow twin bed and looked at the ceiling fan above, dusty but spinning. I was warm. Not comfortable, not yet, but warm. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I would. But instead, I found myself staring at the paper bag from the thrift store, still holding the receipt from the coat. My name wasn't on it. No one would ever know. And yet, it felt like proof. Proof that I existed, outside of their needs, outside of their expectations. The phone rang. Blocked number. I didn't answer. I turned it off and placed it face down on the nightstand. If they needed me, really needed me, they could find a way to say so with more than a call. I didn't trust a voice anymore unless it came with action. The clock ticked past 9. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking to make someone's lunch, pick up a prescription, or clean a mess I didn't make. And in the morning, when I opened the window and felt the crisp air rush in, I remembered something strange and almost silly. I could buy myself flowers, not expensive ones, not even fresh. Just enough to remind me that I was here. Still here. Still standing. And they? They had the house, but not the warmth. Not anymore. Nancy called the next day, then again, then 5 times more before noon. I didn't pick up. The 10th time, I let it ring just to hear the sound. That desperate, pleading chime I used to jump for. Back when I thought being needed was the same as being loved. I waited for her to leave a voicemail. She didn't. Instead, a text came through around 3 in the afternoon. "Mom, we got some kind of notice. What's going on? Please call me. Please." That word sitting there all small and panicked, like it had never been used before. It should have felt good. Should have felt like justice, like maybe she finally understood. But all I felt was tired. So I turned off the phone again. That evening, I went to clean Irene's apartment for the 2nd time. She met me at the door with her cat in her arms and a fresh tin of oatmeal cookies on the table. The place already sparkled, but she said it wasn't about the cleaning. "I just liked the company," she admitted. I liked hers too. After I swept her kitchen, we sat at the table, sipping weak tea with sugar cubes and talking about small things. Broken door hinges, old films, the best kind of laundry soap. I didn't mention Nancy, or Caleb, or June. It felt strange, not dragging them into every room like shadows. "I don't mean to pry," Irene said at one point, stirring her tea. "But you have a very dignified sadness about you." I blinked. That a compliment? She smiled. It is. We sat in silence a while after that. Later, as I zipped my coat to leave, she said, "You know, I have a guest room. No strings. Just, if you ever get tired of paying strangers for cold beds." I thanked her but didn't answer. Not yet. Back in my little rented room, I opened the phone again. More missed calls. A message from Caleb's school about unpaid lunch fees. Another from Nancy. "Did you leave us? Like actually leave? What are we supposed to do?" I stared at those words for a long time. No, I'm sorry. No, I didn't know. Just panic and blame. Still expecting me to fix the fire after they poured gasoline. I didn't respond. Instead, I boiled water in my little electric kettle and poured myself a mug. Sat by the window and watched headlights skim the street below. People going home, wherever that was. For so long, I thought home was a place you paid for, worked for, cooked in and bled in and prayed over. A structure built with muscle and memory. But maybe home was wherever you didn't have to apologize for breathing. I thought of June, of her tiny feet tapping down the hallway in pajamas, of Caleb building blanket forts and begging me to crawl inside. They were so soft once, so full of light. And Nancy, she wasn't born cruel. She was born afraid, I think. And the years hardened that fear until it looked like resentment. But fear doesn't give you the right to use someone's spine as scaffolding. I folded the phone shut and placed it gently on the windowsill. Let it buzz there like a bee trapped under glass. They had the notice now. Knew what it meant. Knew they'd have to figure out utilities, rent, insurance. The things I'd shielded them from for over a decade. The parts of life they pretended were automatic. They'd probably scramble. Maybe curse me. Maybe even try to fight it. But I had the papers, the signatures, the proof. And I wasn't scared anymore. Let them learn what I already had, that nothing is guaranteed. Not the roof above you, not the people around you, not even your own reflection if you stop recognizing it long enough. Let them learn what it means to start over, just like I did. The envelope from Caleb came 3 days later. No return address. Just my name in a careful hand, uneven, like he'd written it twice before on scrap paper and picked the best one. The kind of envelope you open slowly, not because you're worried, but because you want to savor the fact that someone still writes to you. Inside was a lined sheet of notebook paper, the edges frayed, corners bent. "Grandma," it began, "I don't know if you'll read this. Mom's mad. She says you ran away. June cried yesterday. We don't know what's happening." My throat tightened. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the paper like it might disappear. Mom keeps yelling about the house, about letters. She says you tricked her, but I don't think that's true. You were always the one who took care of things. You fixed the sink. You bought my school shoes. You made oatmeal when I was sick, even though I said I hated oatmeal. I laughed. A short, breathy sound that ended in something closer to a sob. He had hated oatmeal. I used to add cinnamon to trick him. "I miss you," he wrote, "and I think Mom is scared but doesn't want to say it." I heard her on the phone with Aunt Lisa. She said we might have to move in with her if we can't find another place. I pictured Nancy in her kitchen, pacing in socks, snapping at invisible things while the kids tiptoed around her. "I just want to know if you're okay. If you left because of us. I didn't mean to be mean that day. I was just tired and mad, and I know I said something rude. I don't even remember what. But I didn't mean it, Grandma. I really didn't." He remembered. Even if he said he didn't. Mom says we can't afford Christmas this year, but I don't care. I just want things to be like before everything got weird. If you write back, send it to my friend Benny's house. He said it's okay. I told him you were the best grandma ever. Please write back. It wasn't signed with love. Just from Caleb. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it between the pages of a book I kept beside the bed. Not because I wasn't going to answer, but because I needed to breathe first. To sit with the words. He was just a boy, 12. Trying to grow up in a house that had leaned too long on someone else's backbone. He didn't deserve the chaos, but he had felt the weight of it. That much was clear. That evening, I walked to the small grocery store down the street. Bought a pack of envelopes. The woman at the register smiled as she rang them up. "You send letters?" she asked. I nodded. "Sometimes." Back in my room, I took out a pen. The first words came slow, but they came. "Dear Caleb, you didn't make me leave. None of this is your fault. Sometimes grown-ups break things they don't know how to fix, and instead of saying sorry, they pretend it didn't happen. That's not your job to carry." I kept it short, kind, no blame. I told him I was okay, that I was staying somewhere warm, that I still made oatmeal with cinnamon sometimes, and still thought about him in June when I saw jelly beans in a jar. I didn't talk about the house. He didn't need that burden. Before I sealed the envelope, I tucked a photo inside. An old one from a drawer in the shelter, the last time we carved pumpkins on the porch. Him holding a lopsided face, proud as if he'd invented Halloween. Then I walked to the mailbox at the corner, slipped it in, stood there a moment. The night was quiet, the wind sharp, but I felt something new rise inside me. Not forgiveness. That takes time, but hope. The kind you forget you still deserve. The law office was on the third floor of an old brick building, tucked between a bakery and a shuttered bookstore. No gold lettering on the glass, no fancy receptionist. Just a bell on the door and a waiting room with mismatched chairs that had probably seen better cases. I sat with the folder on my lap. A folder I'd carried for years, its corners soft from use, the edges frayed like memory. Inside, the deed, the letters I'd signed, my bank statements, the notice of ownership change, everything in order, everything mine. The lawyer, Mr. Benjamin Carver, looked younger than I expected. 40, maybe, polished, but with soft hands. The kind of man who says ma'am like he means it and doesn't flinch when you speak your truth slowly. "Mrs. Joyce," he said, after glancing through the documents, "you've handled this well. Clean paperwork, strong signatures. There's no loophole here." "I wasn't worried about loopholes," I said. "I was worried about them showing up with demands." He nodded. "Your daughter?" "Yes." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "She doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. The house is yours, has always been. What you've done, reasserting possession, filing the 30-day notice, is well within your rights, especially considering you were the sole financial contributor." I exhaled. I didn't know I'd been holding my breath. "I want to do something else," I said, sliding another paper across the desk. "Set up a transfer of authority, a trust, something that protects what little I have." He looked at the name I'd written at the top. "Caleb Joyce?" I nodded. "He's young, yes, but not like the rest of them. He still has something soft in him." Carver studied me a moment. "You're sure?" "I'm not leaving it all to him. Just setting up the bones, something I can control now and shape as I go. I've got a few hundred saved again. A few new things in my life that I want to protect. If something happens to me, I want those things to go where love still lives." He didn't question it, just pulled out a different set of forms and began to explain them gently, clearly. I listened, asked questions, took notes. By the time I left the office, the sun was low and golden, washing the street in a kind of late autumn light that made everything look warmer than it was. I stopped at the bakery on impulse, bought a single butter cookie wrapped in wax paper, sat on a bench outside and ate it slowly, feeling every crumb melt on my tongue. Then I walked to the post office. There was another letter waiting. From Caleb. No envelope this time, just a folded paper sealed with tape. Inside, 3 sentences. "Got your picture. Mom says you're cruel, but I don't believe her. I taped the photo to my wall." I pressed the page to my chest. Cruel. That's what she called me. After everything. But I didn't feel cruel, not anymore. I felt like someone who had finally picked up the sharp pieces of her own heart and started putting them somewhere safe. Later, I stood at the window of my little room, the night deepening outside. I looked at the folder now resting neatly in my drawer, legal papers snug inside, and felt something settle. No one could take what was mine again. Not the house, not the name, not the years, and not the right to decide where my kindness goes. From now on, that kindness would be earned, not assumed, not extracted, earned. I was learning, piece by piece, how to love with boundaries, and how to live without begging to be seen. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman with clients, but there I was, standing in the living room of a woman named Laverne, holding a Swiffer in one hand and a grocery list in the other, while she rattled off her allergies and her favorite brand of lemon drops. "You don't need to do the guest room," she said, waving a hand. "No one visits anymore. Just make sure the windows in the kitchen don't streak. I can't stand streaks." I nodded, pulled my gloves on, and got to work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it was mine. Word had spread. Maeve kept passing my name around like a well-kept secret. "She's dependable," she'd tell them, "and she doesn't talk too much." That seemed to be what most people wanted. Someone who'd come in, move gently, notice the details, and leave a space better than it was. I wasn't fast. My knees made that clear. But I was thorough. I folded towels the way I'd once folded June's tiny dresses, corners neat and soft. I scrubbed grout with the focus of someone who needed to be needed, but on her terms now. By the end of each shift, I had sore shoulders and a small envelope of cash. Sometimes a tin of cookies, sometimes just a thank you that didn't feel hollow. And each time, I left with more than I brought. There's a rhythm to it. Small work, quiet homes, women who used to be seen and now just want clean windows and one good conversation a week. And I listened. To their stories, their aches, their grown children they hadn't spoken to in years, their husbands long buried or long gone, their regrets tucked in drawers next to old lace handkerchiefs. We weren't so different. Irene once said, "People like us, we're the walls, the parts of the house that hold everyone else up. Until one day, they realize the paint's chipping and the heat doesn't hold, and suddenly, we're just in the way." I knew exactly what she meant, but I wasn't a wall anymore, not to them, not to anyone. One afternoon, after cleaning 2 apartments and delivering groceries to Maeve's cousin, I bought myself a notebook. Hardback, red, on sale for $3.99. I sat in the park and opened to the first page. At the top, I wrote, "Things that are mine," and I started listing. My time, my money, my hands, my choices, my peace, my no, my yes. Then, at the bottom, in smaller print, my softness. Only for those who treat it kindly. I closed the book, slid it into my bag. On the way back to the boarding house, I passed a small storefront with a hand-painted sign. Help needed, light domestic work. I went in. Spoke to the woman behind the counter, a silver-haired lady named Trina, who ran a little service matching caretakers and cleaners with seniors. She looked at my notes, asked a few questions, then said, "You've got kind eyes and a spine." "Thank you," I said. "No," she corrected. "Don't thank me. You earned that." She offered me part-time hours to start. Said if I wanted more, it was mine. Said the last person who held the job left to open her own business. I smiled. "I'm not quite there yet," I said. "Doesn't matter," she said. "You're facing forward now." That night, I wrote in the notebook again. I'm not what they left behind. I'm what I chose to carry forward. And for once, I believed it. I saw them one last time, by accident mostly. I was walking past the community center with a bag of linens for the outreach closet when a silver sedan pulled into the lot too fast. The passenger door opened, and there she was. Nancy, thinner than I remembered, hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing the same coat I'd left hanging in the hall closet months ago. Caleb stepped out behind her, taller now, voice cracking as he said something I couldn't hear. June didn't get out of the car, just stared at her phone through the glass. They hadn't seen me, and I didn't move. I stood behind a pillar near the steps, out of sight but close enough to feel the wind shift when Nancy slammed the door shut. I wondered what she was here for. Help with housing, maybe. Food vouchers. Someone to listen. Something I used to be. For a second, just a second, I thought of walking up to her, of reaching out, but I didn't. Not because I was bitter, because I was done. I turned and walked the other way, my steps quiet, steady. The linens warm against my chest. I wasn't their safety net anymore, and they had the house, or what was left of it. The walls, the pipes, the chipped paint, and the bills, the empty spaces where I used to be. But they didn't have the warmth. They didn't have me. Later, I sat on the back steps of the co-op, the air thick with rain, and watched water collect in the cracks of the pavement. Inside, someone was boiling pasta. Someone else was playing old jazz on a tinny speaker. And upstairs, in my room, was a new set of curtains I'd bought from a thrift store with tiny blue flowers stitched into the hem. Mine, all of it. The peace, the stillness, the earned quiet. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. That's the thing people don't understand about leaving. It's not always about anger or revenge. Sometimes, it's just about no longer agreeing to disappear. It's about waking up and realizing you're not a ghost yet. So here I am, still standing, still folding towels for women who remember what it meant to be forgotten, still writing lists in my red notebook, still saying no and yes and not anymore in the right places, still here. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been the hands that held up a house, the voice that kept the peace, the silence that filled every corner, don't wait until they erase you to find your outline. Draw it now. Keep it bold. And don't be afraid to walk away holding only what's yours. It might be the first honest thing you've ever carried.